Welcome back to the Student Telecaster build. Once again, I am doing this video series for students that I'm teaching at a college in their lutherie program. And I've had some questions about, since I'm doing these videos and I'm teaching this class to basically first-time guitar builders, why do I use advanced tooling like laser cutters to cut these templates and things like that. And if you go back to the very first episode, I believe it was, that I aired, what I said that I was going to do in this series is I was going to use the tools or like tools that the school has available for the students to use. So even though the students may not have all the tools that I use in this build in their own personal shop or sometimes dining room table, they do have access to them at school, and that's why I'm teaching this. And honestly, tools are something that any guitar builder, any woodworker for that matter, needs to invest in. And I believe that if you're going to invest in tools, you should invest in the highest quality tools that you possibly can afford. That goes along with my theme of excellence. Do the best that you can with whatever time, talents, and resources that you have available to you. Okay, so that's how you should pursue this. So if you don't have the tools that I'm using here, I would say make a plan to buy some of these tools. And if you can't do that because your spouse won't let you buy tools, then find a new spouse. I'm kidding about that. But no, there's ways to kind of accommodate certain things and save up and buy the things in a certain sense of priority. You should want to do that. Also, if you're doing this as a lone wolf, you know, in your shop and you don't have any outside guitar making friends, you need to make some friends, okay? Because I don't have a laser cutter either, but I have a friend and we do things for each other, and I can then use his laser cutter when I need something done. So that's an important thing. Have friends, have mentors, have people in the business that are like-minded, and get acquainted with those people. Be friends with those people. Don't only take from them. Exchange what you have to offer to help them, and in turn there's things that they could do to probably help you. So I know this is kind of a soapbox, but that's how it is. We're working on the Telecaster build. I might have said this already, but this is episode 10 of the Telecaster build. And we're making some really good progress, and I'm still about 1 or 2 classes behind of what I've been demoing at the school. So basically, where we're at with the Stratocaster build that I'm doing live in the class is all the way up to hand making a pick guard. And I've installed the pickups and the switch into there just to make sure everything fits nicely. And I've mounted the neck. So we're at the point at school where my next demonstration is probably going to do a couple other refinements to this, but we're going to start putting on the hardware, the tuners and the bridge, and putting at least the high and the low E strings on, and see and double check that everything fits right and the alignment is right. So I got to catch up on the Telecaster build. For those students that are building the Telecaster in my class, I want them to have these videos available to them. Plus, for the ones that are lagging behind, I want them to have these videos so that they can refer back to it just in case they forget something that I had talked about or demonstrated. So before we go right into what we're going to do today on the Telecaster build, let me talk about wood. If you'll remember back in whatever episode, because I don't remember, but when we started putting the body blank together, we took 3 pieces of alder from a local hardwood store, and we glued those up and created our own body blank. This is a cost-effective way. Instead of buying a industry-specific instrument electric guitar body blank, you'll spend a lot less money doing it that way. But I will tell you there is a difference in quality. And this is where you have to make choices sometimes of how much you're going to spend. And if you're watching my videos, there should be one thing that you know quite clearly that you're not going to hear me say. Here's the cheapest way to do something. You will never see that tagline. I know I miss out on a lot of attention grabbing headlines by saying the cheapest this, the cheapest that, the cheapest guitar neck, the cheapest body, the cheapest guitar. You know, I have no interest in being the cheapest in anything that I do. What I do have an interest being is being excellent and using the best materials that I possibly can afford, the best parts that I can afford, the ones that are most appropriate for the job at hand, and so on and so forth. So for this one, and for my students' benefit, I glued up the slabs. But I will tell you, I found that after I got done cutting and doing my roundovers and everything, I had a lot of splits, you know, kind of in the back and in the end grain from the wood that wasn't really prepped and designed as a blank to be made as an electric guitar body. Now, I tried to take care, I tried to cut off the ends and not use all the way up to the ends and things like that, but the splits still were there because it's just a different type of process that it goes through. So what I did was I just flooded it, all of those cracks in the end grains with some Glue Boost CA glue. And I did that just to solidify the wood a little bit. But it does stain. I could eventually maybe sand most of this out, but it won't matter on this guitar because this guitar is not going to have a transparent finish. Or if it does have a transparent finish, it'll be a really, really dark transparent. So those little cracks won't be any more evident than just the grain itself. So that's something you have to be careful with. Save a few bucks when you can. But if it's a really important project, maybe you're building it for somebody else and it's very important and it's a high profile project, don't get hung up on $80 for a blank versus $20 worth of wood from the local hardwood. Don't get hung up on $60. It really doesn't make that big of a difference when you're thinking about the risk that you're taking of the wood may begin to have those fractures in it either now or over time. So another tidbit. So what are we going to cover today? Sorry for the big long preamble, but let's get right into the meat of what we're going to do. We're going to cover about 6 different things today. The first thing we're going to cover is a couple additional routing jobs that we want to do. I did talk about adding additional switch functions, what we call switchology, in the underneath the pickguard area of the lower horn. And I decided I am going to go ahead and do that. So I made myself another template, and I did not use a laser cutter to make this template. For those of you who think that I always have to use a laser cutter to make everything, I use a CNC router this time. But anyway, that template will allow me to route out an extra pocket underneath the pickguard for different functionality that I want this guitar to have. And not that it needs it to have, but I just can't help myself. I mean, I'm a custom guitar builder. I want to add features that aren't standard, and I'm trying my best to keep it as much standard of a Tele as possible, but I can only take that so far. So we're going to do that. The other thing that I really like is creating a little recessed area where the back neck plate joins in. And we're going to go ahead and do that also. I just like it for the comfort, you know, of playing the upper frets. I think it's a lot easier to reach around the frets from the back side when it's not as much meat there. Word of caution though, we have a little bit more than 1 inch of space there. I don't want to take off any more to reduce that heel area to less than 5/8 of an inch. So I'll probably only take off 3/8 of an inch right there on that recess on the back. Then a couple things that I promised in the last episode. We're going to go ahead and carve the forearm contour. I've got it already mapped out. I'll go over that in detail with you. And then we're going to carve a belly cut on the back of this Telecaster body. And I'll go over how to lay that out too when we get to that. And the last 2 items that we're going to do is a couple other detail things that we need to do prior to the dry fit. And one of those is going to be to install the jack. We're going to go ahead and put an Electro Socket jack in the side. And then the other thing we have to do is we have to connect all these cavities with the wire routes. So we're going to go ahead and do that with an extended drill bit. So that'll be the last thing that we do on this episode. All right, I went ahead and did the old Forstner I'm going to take this pocket down to 1 1/4 inch, so I took the Forstner bit to 1 1/8. That allows me to clean up the bottom and get all those little points from the Forstner bit out of there. So I'm going to clamp this to the table just so it's stable. I've got a 1/2 inch deep bit in there right now. It's a double bearing. I always like more than one, sometimes 3. What I'm going to do is start with at least 1/2 to 3/4 of the first bearing visible above there. That ensures that I'm going to make contact with the template and I'm not going to hit it with the bit. And we're just going to work our way around and down until we get all the way to 1 1/4 inches deep. All right, there we go. There's my optional electronics cavity for some advanced features that I'll be using. So that was done pretty quick, pretty easy when you use the Forstner bit first, then use the router bit, and you don't plunge into your template. All those things are recipes for success. Now we're going to do the recess on the heel, right underneath the neck plate. So for that, I like to make up a template, which I have here, that shows me the back of the guitar shape and then what I want to be the recess, and I can then route that out. Now the bit that I like to use is a bowl style bit. It's got a 1/4 inch radius. It's about, oh gosh, what is that? That's probably 5/8 inch wide. It's 3/4 inches tall, and it's got a double bearing built into it. So I like that bit for this operation. The problem is I'm only going to be recessing 3/8 of an inch, and it's 3/4 of an inch tall. So if you do the math there real quick with a 1/4 inch template, my bearing is not going to be in contact with the template when it gets down to that depth. So that is no bueno. So what I did was I made an exact replica of the body shape in a 3/8 inch thick material. That combined with the template will give me the ability to go 3/4 inches down, which is taking 3/8 of an inch off the back of the heel, and allow my bearings to ride perfectly on that template. Because there's potential for flex at the end of this 1/4 inch plexiglass, I have my little extendable foot system that I think I showed everybody on a previous video, but it is pretty slick. So I just take those nuts and I tighten up underneath until you get to the point where that is nice and stable, and we'll do that on both sides. Now we have a very stable platform for the router to work on, and we're going to take 3/8 inch out with that bit. Now, because we don't want to take that entire 3/8 in one pass, and if we try to take it in lighter passes, that bearing will not make contact with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bushing. And the bushing guide will mean basically it doesn't matter whether or not the bearing makes contact. I can take off as little or as much as I want and work my way around, and when I get to the final depth, then take the bushing guide off and take it right up to the acrylic guide with the bearing, and then we should be perfect. All right, now with the bushing guide in place, I'm just going to bottom out that bit, and I'm going to set my depth stop to roughly 3/8 of an inch, but I'm going to round it up to 10 millimeters, and that will be all I need. I purposely left off my dust collection hose to show you what a mess it can make without dust collection. Do you believe that? No. I totally forgot to connect that dust collector. And look at this, it's a mess. Matt would be proud to see my shop is a mess right now. Anyway, We've got this done all the way up to the bushing guide, and now we're going to take the bushing guide off and we're going to go down to our final depth stop, and we're going to do one more pass just along the edge. That's all we need. Everything else is down to the final depth. There's a little bit of rippliness, if that's a word, I'm not sure, but that will sand out very rapidly just with a little block hand sander. So we will go ahead and take care of that after the fact. I'm pretty happy with the job the template does in that bit. The only anomaly that we have is we've got a round over all the way around this, and then this is basically a cove on the inside, which is nice, but now I have to manually put a round over in this top edge all the way around and blend it into the areas that it joins in with, and then it's going to look great. And I'm just going to do that with rasps and little sanding blocks and things like that. How about we take a closer look here? All right, there's the recess. There's the nice little 1/2-inch radius bowl bottom bit. And then manually rounding over the top to kind of blend in. All right, according to my list, forearm contour is next. So what I did with the forearm contour is I drew a line that just kind of angles at the natural playing position of the guitar. All right, so something like that. And my arm in a natural position kind of creates almost a perpendicular angle to that line. And then I have to figure out how much do I want to take off. In this case, I'm going to do binding around the edge. And that does influence how much I do take off. Normally I would take about 3/4 of an inch. I'm only going to go about a 1/2 inch. So from the perpendicular line, I drew another line that's about a 1/2 inch, and then I basically connected the dots with a gentle sloping line to where it intersects the line that I drew on the front. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to carve this out. All right, now that we have our lines drawn, we know what we need to take down, and I want to take it down in a linear flat fashion. So I want that to be flat both this way and this way. So have your straight edge ready to double check that. My go-to is this Shinto rasp that I find just very good at just taking meat off. Now I want to keep my line there because I want everything to be crisp. So we'll just kind of gently work up to that point, both intersecting my side line and this line, hopefully simultaneously. Okay, I'm right up to my line. Just shy of my line down here. I can take a little bit more off if I'd like, or I can just say, you know, that's good. It's got a good break to it. It looks right, and you can go with that. So to finish this off, I could take a sanding block and get that nice and flat. Basically, it's pretty flat, but we got to smooth it out. Another thing we could do is take your traditional block plane and just kind of shave it the last little bit. And this is what we want. We want those nice light shavings. Now it's perfectly flat in 2 axis. Now what I'm going to do is just take a sanding block and just break that corner right there. I still have a very defined line, but just a nice soft transition. And it looks good and it feels good, and that's really what you're after. Now we're moving on to the belly cut right there. So of course I make up another template just because I like consistency, right? You know, it's not that hard. So I'll just line up this shape on the guitar, and again I'll draw my reference line. So it's very important not just to wing these things, but to have reference lines. And so that's what I'm establishing here. Now what I did in addition to that reference line is I took the dimension that I want, okay, in this case 3/4 of an inch down, and create those sloping lines to intercept where it is on the top. Okay, and then I'm going to carve that down. Now we can do the exact same process as what we just did for the forearm contour in doing that. The only difference is it won't be perfectly level this way because it kind of swoops, but it will be perfectly level this way if we took multiple measurements perpendicular to that belly cut. And so that's what the goal is, to achieve that. So we can do it with the same way, the different rasps and sanders and things like that to get that down. The block plane won't work because it's not flat. You could use a spoke shave, one with a concave, one with a rounded sole on it. You know, will get in there nicely, so we could certainly use that to get it nice and flat. But we've been doing a lot of hand tool stuff so far today, right? Are we allowed to use a little bit of power? I think so. Why don't we break something out here? The old Merlin 2. I actually demoed this at school for the Strat tummy cut, but it's pretty cool. A little circular, almost like a little grinder, but this is kind of a miniature one. And it's very controllable, and it's pretty cool. I've got different abrasive discs that it comes with, and then I've got different grits of sandpaper that can be swapped out. So why don't we go ahead and set one of these up. I'm going to use this red one to start, and we're going to start dishing this out with a little bit of power. Alright, so as you just saw in fast motion, we took the Merlin 2 and we just kind of used that abrasive wheel, and we began just working in a sweeping motion back and forth until we got down to our 3/4 inch line. At the same time, we were right on our arc. Alright, and then I took the sander, little dual action sander, and kind of worked that with a nice firm flat disc, worked that back and forth to kind of ensure that it stayed flat, and then took it right to the edge and then softened up that corner right there with the sander. Pretty easy process. The last thing that we have to do is we have to match now by hand the radius that we have on the rest of the guitar. I could take this back to the workbench, but I'll work on it right here a little bit just so you can see what I'm doing. Working back and forth, working that full radius. All right, there it is. Blended in nicely, nice soft edges, and totally uniform across that swoop. Okay, I think I just did it again. I think I just showed you how to drill holes without turning the camera on. So, anyway, let me reenact it for you. Basically, you've got the extra long drill bit. I'm using a 1/4 inch. We're going to use some type of steel plate to protect the neck pocket as we drill all the way through into the main pocket. I also did the exact same technique over on this side, where I used a protective piece on that body and I drilled at an angle from the Tele bridge pickup into the main electronics compartment there. And then the last one was right over here, going from the main electronics to my auxiliary electronics compartment by doing the same thing there. Again, always using a protective layer of something against the top of your guitar so that you don't put any digs and scratches in at this point. So that's what I just did, and I think I forgot to turn on the camera, so that was a reenactment. Very simple process though, so that's all there's to it. Now, what I was just mentioning before I realized the camera was not on is I want to drill the Electro Socket. Okay, the Electro Socket is centered in the thickness of the guitar body, 1 3/4, and then there's a flat spot on the Telecaster template, and that is basically a center line is drawn in between those two flat spots, and that's the angle of which we are going to take and go right into our underneath the Tele control plate. This is cool. With that flat spot, we've got a little lip on the Electro Socket, and basically the dimension is 0.85. All right, so that is closest number to that I can use is probably going to be 7/8, right? 7/8, yep. So 7/8 of an inch is what we're going to bore that through. Now we could bore it just far enough for our jack, or we can take it all the way through. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to take it all the way through. And if I don't have a flat spot on a guitar, a lot of times I'll bore another hole first that's to the outer diameter, which I believe is 1 inch. Yeah, right at 1 inch, and that way the entire Electro Socket is kind of flush mounted. But in this particular case, no need. So we're just going to go ahead and drill that out. I like to always mark all my center lines with a hole punch. Just give something for that, that bit to follow. All right, there we go. Is it science? Or is it art? How about we start up with some close-ups of everything we did? We routed out this additional features cavity. We then used the template to route out the neck plate recess area for easier reach. Slightly out of order, but we did the belly cut. Took that out and then rounded to match the edge there. We also worked on a nice and modest forearm contour, just enough to soften up the area there, but not too steep where it'll make difficulty with our binding, which comes later. We drilled all the holes for the wire routes. And lastly, we drilled the hole for our Electro Socket. Go all the way into the main cavity. We are almost caught up to where the Strat that I'm building inside the classroom is happening. Next thing that we're going to do with the Telecaster in the next episode is we're going to install the neck itself and the screws to bolt on the neck. And we're also going to make a pick guard for the top of the Telecaster. So we are moving right along. Got a lot done on this episode. A lot was happening. It was moving pretty fast, and I had to speed up a lot of the video in order to kind of get through it in a reasonable amount of time. If you've got any questions or comments whatsoever, send them my way. I try my best to answer as many of the questions as I possibly can. Generally happens in spurts as I have time available. But certainly let me know if you have any questions. All right, you know the drill. No matter what you do, start with excellence.